Hello. Okay, so I've been experimenting with some different ideas, ways to celebrate the arrival of football season. So here we go. Week 1, Big Ten matchups from worst to best. I've been seeing some videos pop up on YouTube, like every Genesis album ranked worst to best. So I said, okay, let me try that out with Week 1 games, just the Big Ten matchups. So here, check this out. So there are 11 Big Ten games in Week 1. All 14 of the Big Ten teams are in action. There are 3 games between Big Ten opponents, so 3 conference games, if you will. Okay, so check this out. Production value up the wazoo. All there on the slideshow. All right, we're ready to go. So this is going to be 11th from worst to first. So 11th, we have Towson at Maryland. So I'm not going to sit here and try to crap on Towson as a team. I actually don't know the first thing about them. I'm not going to crap all over Maryland for scheduling this game. It is the only matchup of the week in the Big Ten that features a Big Ten team against an FCS opponent. So a lot of people schedule these kind of games. I think when you're in a Big Five, Power Five conference, and you schedule these FCS games, it doesn't really help too much. I think you don't get respect from the other schools or in the polls for winning those games because you're supposed to win those games. Sometimes, if you're ranked and you play a close game against teams like this, you drop in the polls, or if you lose to an FCS team, you're kind of the laughingstock of the country, at least till the next team come along and lose to one. All right, so in 2022, Maryland finished 8-5. They beat North Carolina State in the bowl game. All right, so going on to next one, worst to best. We have East Carolina at Michigan. I'm not saying Michigan isn't good. I just don't think this is going to be a good game. It's, I guess the first chance for Michigan fans to see their team for this year. I'm not a Michigan fan. So last year, Michigan finished 13-1. They lost to TCU in the college football playoff. East Carolina finished 8-5. They beat Coastal Carolina in their bowl game. I saw an East Carolina game last year. I saw East Carolina at Temple, and Temple lost to them a game that they definitely could have won. It was an exciting finish. So I don't think this is going to be a good game to watch. All right, so going up next, we have Ohio State at Indiana. So normally I think the conference games would rank higher on such a playlist, or they're on such a countdown, than the non-conference games. But I know Indiana's not going to win. You know Indiana's not going to win. The Indiana players and coaches, they know that Indiana's not going to win. I think one time about 6 years ago, I think Ohio State was at Indiana on a Thursday night on opening week, and I think it might have been close for a few quarters. But that was a different time. That's not this Indiana team. The reason why this rates above the Michigan game, it's a conference game, so it's just a matter of time. After the game, Ohio State goes into first place in the Big Ten East. Last year, Ohio State finished 11-2. They lost to Georgia in the college football playoff. Indiana finished 4-8. Okay. Next up, we have, going from worst to best, next up we have Central Michigan at Michigan State. Okay, it's an in-state matchup against a FBS team. Michigan State did not make a really big splash last year in Mel Tucker's first year of his extended contract there. Michigan State finished 5-7. Central Michigan finished 4-8. I think Michigan State usually takes care of business in these kinds of games. Michigan State is 4-0 against the MAC in the past 5 years. So I think Michigan State will handle this game. So next, that brings us to Utah State at Iowa. Okay, last year Utah State finished 6-7. They lost to Memphis in their bowl game. Iowa finished 8-5. They finished with a shutout win over Kentucky in their bowl game. I would not be surprised to see Iowa's offense sputtering out of the starting gate, thereby keeping this a relatively close game. Last year, Iowa had a bit of a reputation for offensive, what's the word I'm looking for offensive lack of production, offensive futility. Not on the scale of like Penn State in 2004, but it's kind of known that they won 8 games in spite of their offense, not because of it. So I think Iowa will handle this game. In the last 5 years, Iowa is 11-2 versus non-conference opponents. Their only losses to Iowa State and Kentucky, not last year in the bowl game, but in the bowl game before that. So I think Iowa gets out of this one with a win for sure. All right, so bringing us down to the next matchup, we have Buffalo at Wisconsin. Okay, last year Buffalo finished 7-6. They beat Georgia Southern in their bowl game. Last year, Wisconsin finished 7-6. They beat Oklahoma State in their bowl game. Okay, both teams finished 7-6 last year. We know that finishing 7-6 in the MAC is not the same as finishing 7-6 in the Big Ten. In the preseason polls, Wisconsin is the highest ranked of the teams in the Big Ten West. I think they're ranked 19th in the AP in the preseason. Not that matters for anything. So yeah, my plan is to turn to this game, try to catch some of it. I think it's a win for Wisconsin, but it might be I think it'll be worth flipping to. All right, so that brings us to number 5, Toledo at Illinois. So there are 2 Week 1 games that put a Big Ten team against a conference champion from last year. So one of them is Toledo at Illinois. Toledo finished 9-5 last year. They beat Ohio in the MAC championship game and then beat Liberty in their bowl game. Illinois finished 8-5 last year with a loss to Mississippi in their bowl game. My understanding is expectations are slightly higher for Illinois going into this year. So I think it's a nice Week 1 Midwest showdown. Could be a good game. Yes, I'll turn to this game if I have a chance, God willing. All right, we have 4 more to go. Coming up next, we have Fresno State at Purdue. So the other team playing a conference champion from last year is Purdue. Last year, Purdue finished 8-6. Ended up going on to be the team to go on to lose to Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. Then they lost to LSU in even less impressive fashion in their bowl game. Fresno State finished 10-4. They beat Boise State in the Mountain West championship game. Then they beat Washington State in their bowl game. For Purdue last year, Aiden O'Connell, Charlie Jones, they both had a big year. Both have gone on to the NFL. So I think, this will be a challenge. I think if for some reason I were to get kidnapped and I miss the entire Week 1, all the games, and then I come back to civilization and you told me that one Big Ten team lost out of conference, I would guess that it would be Purdue. But anything happened. I think this will be a good game. I will watch it. I plan to watch it. All right, coming up next we have Northwestern at Rutgers. So, if anybody is out there in YouTube land watching this, and I am not assuming that anyone is watching this, but if anyone is watching this, certainly somebody's eyebrow is going up right now. Last year, Northwestern finished 1-11. Rutgers finished 4-8. So the thing is, sometimes I like watching games like this. I like watching games toward the end of the season. I like watching games between the teams that are trying to avoid last place in their conference. But it's week 1, so everybody's 0-0. Both teams have a definite uphill climb here. Northwestern 1-11 last year. They just fired Pat Fitzgerald, their longtime coach, because of the hazing scandal. It's kind of a shame. Fitzgerald, he kind of put the program on the map when he was a player, and then went on to be the coach. So it's a little bit. I'm not a Northwestern fan per se, but it's a little bit sad to see him go like that. It'll also be a little bit sad to see him coaching for somebody else, but I'm guessing that's probably going to happen. Rutgers coach is Greg Schiano. Schiano, he's still a good coach, but Schiano took Rutgers to an almost Big East champion back in the day. That was like their best year ever. But they're in the Big Ten now. The road to the Big Ten championship does not go through Louisville. So anyway, both of these teams are facing an uphill climb this year. But I think this is a Sunday game. At the end of the day, one of these two teams will pull to a tie in first place in their respective division in the Big Ten. Okay, so next up, we have 2 to go. So next up is Nebraska at Minnesota. Okay, last year Minnesota finished 9-4. They beat Syracuse in the bowl game. I think that was the Pinstripe Bowl. Nebraska finished 4-8 last year. Is this still a big game just because it's Nebraska? That's my question. Nebraska has not been to a bowl game since 2016. Back around then, they had a coach who was going 9-4, 10-4, having like 9-4, 10-4 years, and they fired that coach because that's not good enough for Nebraska. I get that, but Nebraska came into the Big Ten in 2011, and you don't just come into the Big Ten and just start winning the conference every year. Fired that coach, and they've had a bunch of losing seasons. I saw a Nebraska game last year. I went to Nebraska at Rutgers. And I gotta say, I was impressed with the fans. It was a Friday night game. A whole lot of Nebraska fans were there in north central New Jersey. I'm assuming most of them came out from Nebraska, from listening to some of their conversations. So 2 things I know about this. For one, Nebraska, they can go 1-11 and they will still sell out their huge stadium. There's not too much else to do in Nebraska from what I've heard. Other thing I know, Nebraska has not been relevant for a while. I don't want them to be relevant in the Big Ten, but I think at the very least they're going to be a thorn in someone's side, just like last year when they beat Iowa and knocked Iowa out of the Big Ten championship. So do I think this will be a good game? Yeah, I think this will be a good game. I think it'll be worth watching Thursday night. So I'm head out to the local pub as part of my yearly tradition, bring out my family to the local pub and catch the game there. All right, so that brings us to the top game. We've gone from worst to best. So to me, the best in week 1, West Virginia at Penn State. If anyone's watching, maybe some eyebrows have gone up right there. Last year, West Virginia finished 5-7. Penn State finished 11-2 with a win over Utah in the Rose Bowl. Not as the Big Ten champion, unfortunately, but still won the Rose Bowl. And do not allow me to pretend to be neutral about this. I am a Penn State fan for my whole life here. Overall, I can't really brag too much about Penn State's non-conference schedule. It's really kind of weak, but I got to give them some early season love, some week one love. In the past 3 years, Penn State has opened on the road against a conference opponent. All 3 of those games were thrillers. They won 2 of them. The one they lost was against Indiana in the COVID year 2020. In that overtime game on the 2-point conversion, that wasn't. So now they're home for week 1. They've got West Virginia out of conference. West Virginia is not ranked in the preseason polls. There's not a whole bunch of media hype nationwide for this one. But this game is not a week 1 dress rehearsal by any means for an opener. That's the week 2 game against Delaware. But so I'm going to close that with the 3 reasons why this is the top game of the week. So for one, West Virginia, Penn State played each other every year from 1947 to 1992. Penn State dominated the series pretty much, but this is it's a rivalry. It was a rivalry back in its day, and it's still a border war. So I know there's I know that there's still people in West Virginia still hating Penn State. Second reason, this is the only non-conference game against a Power 5 team in week 1. I told you the 3 conference games. Everybody else is playing a Group of 5 team or FCS. And third reason, West Virginia last year they finished 5-7. They did not make a big splash in the Big 12 or nationally, but last year they renewed their rivalry with Pitt in week 1, and that was a great game. Pitt won 38-31. It came down to the wire. West Virginia gave them everything they had, and Penn State had better expect the same thing from West Virginia. I think hopefully it's not a last minute thriller like it is, but I think it'll be a good game. So hopefully Penn State pulls it out. So I mentioned earlier that I've been experimenting with different ways to celebrate the start of football season. In the past year, I created playlists that count down the best all-time matchups between Penn State and all their Big Ten rivals. For instance, Penn State, Ohio State. I made a playlist counting of highlight reels, counting down what were the best games. And so I'm going to attach this video to the last playlist I made, which was West Virginia against Penn State, all of the best matchups as a countdown. So I'm going to tack this video onto that. So hopefully you keep on watching and enjoy that playlist with all those highlight reels there. All right, and thank you guys for sticking out, watching. I'm being a little presumptuous here, but watching my first attempt in trying out to be a sports analyst, if you will. I'm sure it's a total fail, but it'll be fun for me to watch back, I guess.